So now, once you have your dry ingredients together, we're going to mix them nice, mix them all together before adding our yeast and our water. Once you've mixed your dry ingredients, you can make a little well right in the middle, and you could add your water and yeast mixture to the dough. We're going to add 2 tablespoons extra virgin olive oil. It's time to start mixing. Now, we're going to start with the fork, just to make sure that all the water and the flour gets mixed fairly well. But once it starts to get a little sticky, and doughy, we're gonna start using our hands. This is a necessity when making your own dough, because you want to knead it very well. Make sure everything is in there. You want to get your hands in there and start kneading that dough. You may have to add flour once in a while to the mixture. You don't want it to be wet and sticky when you put it on the oven. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on our oven to warm up the stovetop. Remember, we're using the oven, and we're going to put our dough on the stovetop here, and we're going to cover it. Now, for those of you who've made pizza before with the packets and whatnot, you're probably thinking 10 minutes would be fine. Actually, since we're making our dough completely from scratch, we're going to let our dough sit there for 20 minutes. Keeping in mind that we're not using the stovetop to heat our dough, we're using the oven. Once we're done, we're going to take our sauce and move it over, but we're going to keep it on a low heat just to keep it a little fairly heated. Our chicken is done, so now we're going to take our chicken and we're going to let it cool. We're going to let it rest on the plate, because if you cut into you don't want to cut into the chicken right away, because you're just going to get the juices all out, and you don't want that. You want to let it rest. So while we're cooking the rest of our chicken, we're going after about 20 minutes of rising, we're going to get our dough. Once again, you may need some flour. You don't want it's going to be sticky again, so you don't want it to be clinging to your hands and all over the place. So we're going to knead the dough some more. And it's always best to do this with your hands. And we're going to put it on the counter, making sure your counter, of course, is clean and sanitized. You don't want to be putting it on a dirty countertop. We're going to continue to knead our dough a little bit. Remember, this dough we just used we're using it for 3 pizzas. One pizza's, we got one pan that's about 16 inches. The other 2, standard 12. So remember, if you're just cooking one pizza, remember your mixture. But don't worry, we'll recap that later. So now with your pan, you want to use oil or shortening. I'm sure the majority of people around here have used shortening for the most part. I know I do. I always have. So once you've got your pans lined up with some shortening, you want to get your dough ready. Now, as we said, if you're making one pizza and you used 1 cup of warm water, 2 cups of flour with 1 yeast, and you find that it may not be big enough, don't worry. What we're going to do is we're going to be actually cooking our dough before we put anything on it. See, everything that we've done so far is basically cooked and ready to go, so you don't need to have the pizza in for a long time. So what we're going to do is once we have this laid out, we're going to put our dough into the oven by itself. So if your dough is a little thin, don't worry, it's going to rise. So now we want to take the oven and turn it to about 400. We're going to turn it to about a 400. Now we're going to put our dough in for about 5-10 minutes, or until the edges are lightly brown. So while we're waiting for our dough to cook, we're going to get our toppings ready. Now for our toppings, we've decided to go with not a lot. We're not trying to be fancy here. We're not trying to overdress it. It's going to be a simple recipe. So we're going to start off with some red onion. Remember, this is toppings, so you don't have to fine dice these. This is just going to be toppings. So we're going to put some red onions on. We're going to get it fairly sizely cut. And for 2 pizzas, you could probably get away with just using half of a red onion, depending on how much you like it. But we find that half a red onion is more than enough for 2 pizzas. As you can see, we have some bacon there, some bacon bits we fried up earlier. That's going to be going on our pizza. So now we're going to cut up our chicken into fairly decent slices, and we're going to go against the grain. Just because it'll be easier to chew when you finally dig in there. So we're going to cut up our chicken. As we said, 3 chicken breasts for 1 pizza would be more than enough. So we're going to dice those up. As you can see, we haven't overcooked our dough. And if you can see there, it's even risen a little bit more. Remember, the yeast is still active, so if it's too thin, don't worry about it. So now we're going to take our sauce, which is still fairly warm too, and we're going to give it a fairly good amount of sauce. You don't have to drench your pizza with the sauce. See, look at that. That's right there. That's only a couple spoonfuls on a 12-inch pizza. More than enough. It's perfect. So after we've added our sauce, obviously we're going to start adding our toppings. And we're going to start with chicken. As you can see, we're going to spread our chicken evenly around the pizza. Make sure that all the pizza is covered. Then we're going to add our Then we're going to add our red onions. Next thing, we're going to be adding a family favorite, bacon. Now when we did our bacon, we simply took raw bacon and diced them into decent sized chunks, and we fried them in the frying pan. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add some cherry tomatoes. Now we're using cherry tomatoes because as a topping because it just tastes so much better. And to our cherry tomatoes, we're going to add olive oil, salt, and pepper. And we're going to mix it around so all the tomatoes get their fair share of coating. And we're going to add it to the pizza. So to finish it off here, we're going to add up some Parmesan. As you can see, we got Parmesan in a package. You could use fresh Parmesan, nothing against that. Now we add our cheese, our mozzarella. And once again, we're using bags, but if you wanted to use fresh, if you have blocks of cheese, shredded, fine, that's good. So you want to make sure that your cheese, you give it a nice coat, a nice layer of cheese. It's all covered. Oop, pan's a little hot there, so we're going to use our glove. And we're going to pop it in for another 10 minutes or so. Just enough to really brown the top, brown the cheese, melt it nice and good. Once we're done, this is what you got. Look at that. There you go. Solid Bolid garlic chicken pizza. We're going to finish our second one. We're going to get that cooked and ready to go. So now we've got ourselves 2 pizzas here. Look at that. Nice golden brown topping. A generous layer of crust. Isn't that beautiful? There you go. Solid Bolid garlic chicken pizza here on Weekly Chew. For a recap on today's recipe, log on to www.moquebec.com/mrba/mrba.html.